Entrevistas Alfa.
Hola, yo soy Andrea Tassier de Alfa 91.3 y hoy estoy con Marc Martel. Welcome to Alfa 91.3.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you here. We love your voice.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So let's dive in. We have a lot to talk about.
Okay, let's do it.
You've built a very unusual career because it's part original artist, part interpreter, part guardian of one of the most recognizable voices in rock's history. So do you ever feel like your voice belongs completely to you?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever gotten that question before, so thanks for that. Do I feel like my voice completely belongs to me? I came to realize many years ago that no matter what I sing, people are going to hear Freddie Mercury's voice in my voice. I know this from having my own band for many years. 13 years I had my own band, singing my own music. A single concert went by where someone didn't come up to me and said, "Hey, you sound like Freddie Mercury." I'm like, I know, thank you. And it was always just a really nice compliment. I never knew that it was something very special. I thought, well, it's a big world, right? A lot of people sound like other people. And then, of course, I started singing the music of Queen, and then things changed a lot, and I got to work with Queen and on a movie, and obviously, I don't know if you want to get into that, but it's a strange thing for me. You know, like you said, I'm an artist myself. I make my own music, and it's very important for me to feel like when I step on stage that I'm expressing my own artistry. And I think I've been able to find a nice balance there where, you know, when people come to our show, they see that I don't dress up like Freddie Mercury. I'm not trying to be Freddie Mercury. I think it's enough that I present the music with the sound and the energy that Queen were so famous for. And it's interesting you said that I am what was the word you used? The guardian?
Yeah, the guardian of one of the most important voices. Yeah.
I mean, that seems like that's a lot for me to process, maybe too much, but that's very kind of you to say. Freddie Mercury left such a huge legacy that no matter what, his legacy will continue long after we're gone, you know. But it's really nice to be spoken my name in the same sentence as one of the greatest singers of all time. And I think I do a job that makes me feel good. When I step on stage, I am myself. I'm always myself. And I realize that it's a strange thing to be so closely compared to someone else. And I know there's not a lot of artists out there who don't pretend to be other artists that are so directly, constantly compared to someone else. And I'm thankful for that because it makes my story, like you said, very strange and weird and different. So, I'm happy about it.
When people hear Freddie in your voice, does that feel more like a gift, like a responsibility, or sometimes maybe a limitation?
It can be both, honestly. I think these days, for most people, it's instant recognizability of something that most people love. I guess that works to my advantage. There was a time in my life where it kind of was a disadvantage. I was in a Christian rock band, and sometimes I would hear from, we'd release a radio single. We'd record an album and then, promote our album to the radio stations. And sometimes we loved all the radio station people. They're great to work with, but sometimes they would get feedback from their audience saying, yeah, some people don't like that you guys sound so much like Queen. I'm like, I can't help that. That's the way I sound. I can try to sound like someone else, but that wouldn't be me. Like when I don't try to sound like someone, it sounds like Freddie Mercury. And that's just my life, my curse and my blessing.
I read that you once said that you grew up believing that you had to have one sound as a singer, and then later you realized that you could have many sides. So what changed in you when you stopped trying to be just one thing?
My old band, that was one of our big struggles, was figuring out what our sound was. Not only because of my voice, but because I was not the only lead singer in my band. I shared the lead vocals with another singer who sounded much different than me. He had like a lower voice. We would write songs where one song I would be the lead singer, and then a different song he would be the lead singer. And so people weren't sure what our sound was, because from one song to the next, it almost sounded like a different band. Queen had that same problem, but it wasn't a problem. They made it work for them. There's so many songs in the Queen repertoire, like Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Another One Bites the Dust. They don't sound like any other Queen songs. They sound like a different band. Like my mom thought that Crazy Little Thing Called Love was an Elvis song until recently, you know. But the amazing quality of the music is undeniable, and I'm not afraid of sounding different from one song to the next. That's kind of the way I've done it. It's not the normal way to do it, you know. It's traditionally it's good to have one sound that is immediately recognizable, but hopefully my voice does that and people recognize my voice because I don't know, I think I have a fairly unique sound despite it sounding like Freddie Mercury.
When you perform Queen songs, people usually come with some memories that are already attached to those songs. So how do you honor nostalgia without becoming maybe trapped by it?
These are so interesting, these questions. You're making me think about angles that I've never quite considered. How do I honor nostalgia without getting trapped in it? You know, we don't, we make a point in our show not to perform songs exactly like iconic Queen performances. Like we've never done, you know, Live Aid. We've talked about it because I think people would really enjoy that, but I don't know that that's something that we should do, and I'm not sure about that because it's such a choreographed thing, and I don't like to be stuck. Freddie was never stuck in his performances, obviously. He changed the melodies every time he got on stage. It was a little bit different, but not so different that it was annoying. You know, you could still sing along to it, and so that is the guideline that I use when I sing the music of Queen, is that try to keep it enough that people recognize the song and can easily sing along, and feel free as the lead singer to take some liberties a little bit, but not too much. It's a fine line.
I love that. And yeah, it's definitely a fine line, but you've done it great. So, and now this is kind of like a more, I guess you've probably been asked this question before, but people want to know. So I had to add it. Speaking of that emotional connection that we were talking about with the music, what are the Queen songs that still hit you the hardest personally?
It always changes. Love of My Life has gone in a cycle for me. I didn't know Love of My Life. I had never heard it before I started singing the music of Queen. And so I fell in love with it immediately. It's just a beautiful song. And then, you know, it's one of those songs that I feel like we should perform every single night. I believe that every regular concert I've done since I started singing Queen, like 15 years ago, I've sung Love of My Life. After a while, you start to go on autopilot and you don't really think about what you're singing. But I always try to give a good performance, but it's found new meaning to me in the last year, and it means a lot. It's like kind of a thing that my wife and I have gone through together that has brought new meaning to that song. I always love Under Pressure just because I get to share the lead vocals with my guitar player, and it kind of reminds me of the old days with my old band where I shared the lead. Obviously, Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't feel like I've ever really gotten tired of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Thank you so much for answering that question. You were talking about the film Bohemian Rhapsody. That film introduced Queen to a whole new generation. So from your perspective, what do you think that the younger audiences understand about Queen that maybe the older audiences take for granted?
Well, it makes me think of how, you know, in your teen years, you kind of discover the music that you usually love for the rest of your life. And that's why I love grunge music. I was a teenager during the 90s. But kids who are discovering Queen today, there's nothing today really that sounds like Queen. So I think it does nothing but broaden their understanding of what music can be, you know, compared to the pop music. Rock music isn't really a thing right now. So I'm just really happy that this music from the 70s and 80s is so good that it stood the test of time. You know, every generation has its forgettable music, right? You know, even songs that are big on the radio right now will be completely forgotten in 5 years, but the absolute cream of the crop will continue for hopefully longer than that. And so the best stuff always opens the mind. I think about Queen music a little bit like I think of classical music. You know how they say that when you're a lot of people when they're studying or reading or They listen to classical music to kind of enhance their brain function. Queen is a little bit like that to me compared to today's music. Older people probably take for granted that that's the best music. And I think in a lot of ways, actually, they're right. Music has gotten a lot more simple in the last couple decades. And that's just the natural cycle of things. And it's just good to be able to look back and see where we've come from to get here. And then we're going to get bored of the simple music. It's going to get complicated again. And I hope that I live long enough to see that happen again.
Before all this, you had your own band, which I think is really interesting down here, your own songs, your own creative identity. So do you ever feel that your original music and your Queen work are in conversation with each other?
Yeah. I honestly haven't, you've probably realized I haven't released a whole lot of original music in the last few years, which is always something at the back of my mind and always something that I imagine, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it someday like that. I think that's probably the thing that is most important to me as an artist is creating new music, but I just haven't made it a priority. And for me, it's always an off in the future thing. If you look back at my old band stuff, particularly around our third or fourth album, you could start to hear a little bit of Queen influence because that's when I started listening to Queen. And obviously, it really opened up my creative possibilities as someone who grew up singing in choir. And then I realized that with recording, I can record my voice over and over and over again and be my own choir. And that's a lot of fun. I love doing that. I've done that a lot in a lot of the music I've recorded, a lot of the Christmas music that I've recorded. It's kind of fun. I don't have to hire a choir. I can just be my own. But yeah, I've learned a lot of how to express myself in my own music from Queen, probably more than any other band, honestly. So yeah, for sure.
This is my last question, I promise. Solo album was called Impersonator, which feels almost kind of ironic considering your career. So was that like a confession as a title or a way of taking control of the narrative? Yeah,
I think that is exactly correct. It was kind of my attempt of taking control of the narrative and being just kind of lighthearted about it. It's like I accepted many years ago was like, all right, I'm going to be that guy that always sounds like the other guy. Let's make the best of it. I can still do my own music. And even if people hear someone else in my voice, that's fine. And it happens to be something people love, and I'll make the best of it. I don't consider myself an impersonator. That's a little bit different than what I do, but that's the easy word that people like to use for someone like me, and that's fine. I probably would do the same if I wasn't in my shoes.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was really, really interesting for me and hopefully for the whole audience. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Andrea. I hope they enjoy this conversation. Thank you.
Y recuerden que Marc Martel llegará a la Ciudad de México con One Vision of Queen este próximo 14 de mayo en el Pepsi Center. No se lo pierdan. Yo soy Andrea Tassier y esto es Alfa 91.3.
Entrevistas Alfa.